Tonight's topic is an investor's perspective, and we think it'll be a great opportunity for you to hear from someone who's very actively investing in Oakland County and actually around the United States. As a thank you, though, we know that you're all very busy with your own commission and council and board meetings, and it is Wednesday, so in honor of Wednesday, we have this to start the show.
Happier than a camel on Wednesday.
By the way, Geico paid for our lunches this evening, so thank you. I have a lot of jockeying back and forth of slides. Mr. Gibb?
Oh, you ready? Sure.
Yeah.
Well, good evening. I have to use this mic. Brooks was down in Texas this past weekend, where he spoke to several thousand people at the National Association of Counties. And he was speaking about thoughtful management over crisis management. And of course, it was very apropos for him to be there, since he arrived the day that Detroit filed bankruptcy. And they also won at the same time. So thunderous applause. I was telling our guest tonight, Brooks stood up and gave the budget speech that all of you have heard so many times. And of course, we present our budget hearings tomorrow to the Board of Commissioners. And so for all of your benefit, because you're all good taxpayers in Oakland, we're now balanced through 2017. We're actually proposing that our staff, much to their happiness, I hope, are proposing to get raises for the first time in 5 years. We've had a 5% pay reduction over the last 5 years, and then a pay freeze for 2 years, and now we're actually going to start going in the other direction. So, but at that event, Phil Bertolini, who's our Deputy Executive for IT and Facilities, won his 10th consecutive top 5 in the country Digitally Advanced County in America Award. And then I come here and I use this microphone, and I think, Phil, who'd you pay off for that, really? But that's pretty high praise on it. So we're up with the microphone tonight. We do it because we're recording these sessions for your friends and neighbors who are from your communities that didn't make it tonight. So I see a few new faces, which is good. I see lots of faces from the last time. That encourages me that we didn't bore you off your seats, so you came back. It is 70 and sunny, and Leon's not golfing. It's a good thing. So, we're in good shape tonight. We want to start off with just a little recap of where we left off. Again, so the One Stop Ready program consists of 4 academy sessions for all of you to start getting your mindset into what it means to be an economic developer for your community, and to share those amongst your communities and amongst your peers in your community. So remember, we talked about the hole that we were in. So from an economic context, the jobs that we lost, the big hole that we're trying to replace, and the projection that we're going forward. Now, it's very exciting that we're beating these projections going forward, but it's just a reminder and a reflection of why we're talking about being economic developers for your community. What are the things that you're trying to solve? Are you trying to solve that your master plan is too old? Or are you trying to solve the fact that we lost 60,000 jobs in 2009? How many jobs does the development bring, both construction and real? What's the long-term benefit? And so we're looking at the whole on it. So again, we were talking in the last context of how deep is the hole? What does it mean to you financially? Talking about the decrease in valuation of not only your communities, but the county itself. Remember, we said that in the decade, as we call it, the lost decade, but most importantly, the 5 years from really 04 through 09, we lost 36% of the value of the wealth of Oakland County. That is in the billions and billions of dollars. And so we talked last time about what is the context? What are we trying to do here? What are we trying to fill? And so when you think about economic development, you're not simply thinking about process and planning. You as an economic developer are thinking about, well, darn it, what's the project worth? Some of you might recall I used the example of the Taco Bell restaurant in Oregon that they tabled, and Taco Bell went back to their national committee and they pulled the project. It took us a year to bring it back. Now, it wasn't all that god-awful important that we had fast food in Oregon. The point of it is that what is the investment value? It employs 52 people. What is the investment value? It's a $6 million all-in construction bill to build a Taco Bell restaurant from scratch. That's a $6 million building. If you had a $6 million R&D center come to your town that was going to employ 52 people, you guys would all stay up at night with excitement. For some reason, Taco Bell doesn't. And so we want to think about the context of what does it mean for your community. And we talked about that. We talked about, remember we had the very fast-talking people from the west side of the county over in the Farmington area. They went through this stuff in lightning speed. But this was, what are your assets in your community and how do you apply those assets? And so, examples of things, natural features, but how do you apply them? They did a natural features overlay zone. How do you utilize the assets in your community so that you as an economic developer, one, understand what they are, and two, how are you utilizing them? How are you implementing those assets so that zoning, development work, all the process that we're talking about in economic development doesn't become about what your master plan and your fee chart says. It becomes about how are we utilizing those assets. And so this is some of the things we went over last time. And what's your role? Be proactive, generate ideas, those types of things. So these are a couple of things we thought you'd be interested in going forward into tonight. Tonight's presentation is, well, what's the perception from the investor side of all this? Because we have preconceived impressions when we sit down at the table. If you're a planning commissioner and you sit down, you have a preconceived impression of what the development is, what it means to your community. We're hoping that you're asking the right questions of that development. So tonight we thought it'd be productive to start having you think like an investor. So one of the things is, well, where are we at in thinking like that? So our residential permitting is starting to go up. All right, so you remember in 2009, 2008 and 9, who was elected in those years? I remember I was elected. Or who was working in government in those years? Oh, nobody worked in government in those years? Some of you did, I know you did. So I remember I gave, in January of 2010, I gave the State of the Township address in Orion Township, and I was so proud to say that we had built 5 houses in Orion Township in 2009. And it was intended to say, you knuckleheads, start doing one-stop ready stuff. But it was really strict. So look at how low we got. I mean, this is the residential permits of things. I mean, residential construction is really the earmark, the benchmark of where we are going in the economy. So we're starting to go up. But look at how far behind we are. Again, we got into the hole, it's starting to go up. Let's look at the next slide. Again, thinking like we talked last time. Remember last time we talked about, well, what type of stuff is coming to your community? And we talked about it's not what you used to get to your community. Remember those charts we showed? It changed. Now it's knowledge-based, it's higher tech stuff. Notice what's declined. Now, Alan Kierlich, who's here, doesn't like to see stuff like this. From 11 to 12, the blue box of commercial office is getting smaller, but he'll confirm that it is. There's less getting constructed over these years. Notice how it is shrinking, the commercial retail stuff. Look at what all of a sudden popped back up. Industrial started to pop back up in 12. But look what's really getting big is medical. Institutional is going down. They're not building public buildings. They're not building schools. They're not building things like that right now. So again, thinking about where is the trends? What are things that are coming? The reason we point this out is your master plan might not call for this, but you as an economic developer, if you start to get a sense of where the trends are in your community, master plan is only a guide. Your zoning ordinance can be appealed to the ZBA. There's things and mechanisms that you can do in your community to meet the guidelines and the trend. All right, so local construction employment and total employment. Now, John Ricolta once gave a presentation about this is the key indicator if we're back to health or not. Are people building things? Do you have construction jobs in your community? The only way you have construction jobs is if you get investment into your community, which is tonight, the perspective of the investor. So look at how we slid. And we're coming back up a little bit. Look at how far behind we are. But you know what's interesting about this number? Is Gary Wall here tonight? Did Gary come? Gary, you used to be in this business, right?
Yes, sir.
So would you consider yourself, if you didn't have any work to do in your construction business, because you owned it, right? Didn't you own it? All right. So if you didn't have work for a month, did you consider yourself unemployed, or you just didn't have work?
I considered myself unemployed because I didn't have work.
Because you didn't have work, right? All right. So these numbers here don't reflect the Gary Walls of the world. So how many of you think you have more than one small local contractor in your community? You don't have to raise your hand, all of you do. Of course you do, right? So when we're talking about construction jobs, these don't reflect these numbers, how far we went down. And we're talking, we're going 10, 15,000 jobs in Oakland County in the construction industry. That's just the tradespeople. That's not the local guy. I've got 3 of them in my subdivision that are sole guys that do carpentry work, they do drywall work, they do painting work. These numbers don't reflect that. So think about in your community what you're really addressing when you're talking about this perspective of the whole thing. So let's go to the next slide here. So tonight, here's what we're talking about tonight. We stole this. There was Expansion Solutions magazine. I have no idea what that is, but it came to my office. Lori's shaking her head like she knows what that magazine is. It came to my office. So it's actually pretty interesting. It is there's some articles about the perspective of site selectors, commercial guys, those type of people, and they have different leads and demographics, things like that. So I thought that this chart was really cool to get all of you in the mindset of what we're talking about tonight. We're talking about how is a project perceived from someone other than you. So as a planning commissioner, or as a staff person, or as a council member or board member, I want to point out something that caught my eye in this. So in the big boxes, you have interesting things. So you have traffic counts. It's a pretty big area. And what the real estate is, certainly they kind of said, well, how much money are you going to make? That's out there. Customer analytics. Of course, the site is a huge thing right in the middle of it. What was interesting, though, is that the box that involves you is this one that's kind of hidden behind everything else. And we didn't create this. This was created in a national publication from a site selector perspective. They called it the entitlement process. I don't know if I agree if it's entitlement or not, but that's what they called it. But I thought it was striking to get you thinking about where is our role as economic developers, mine too. If this is the perspective of a national site selection guy that might come to your community and say, I want to bring you a factory, or I want to bring you a Cracker Barrel, or whatever they're going to bring to your community, what are they thinking of when they enter your doors? When they drive into your community from Texas or from Toledo, Tennessee, or Tupelo, wherever they're from, what are they thinking? This is the purpose of tonight. What are they thinking? Are they thinking about how long is it going to take me to get on the planning commission agenda? In this little box that's in there, are they thinking about all these other things? This is very striking to me. Because so often in our zoning work and our economic development work, we get caught up in that the process of what our community is doing is the most important thing. And what we're going to show you tonight is it's not the most important thing. It is a significant factor, but it's not the most important thing. So we're going to ask you about your perceptions. Is that what we're going to do? Have we passed out clickers?
Yeah.
All right. So you're going to play another video for us while we're passing out clickers? All right. Do we have that other YouTube video? Show you that. So while we're passing out clickers, to set the mind of what we're thinking of what an investor would purview when they come to your counter at your office. Is this your counter? That's what we want to know.
Customers didn't like it. So why do banks do it? If your bank doesn't let you talk to a real person 24/7, you need an ally.
I love this guy. That guy works for Allen, I think.
Ally Bank. Your money.
All right, does everybody have clickers that wants to participate? Hopefully everybody grab one. All right, Brett with his bad eyesight is going to click us back here into reality. All right, now remember everyone, these presentations are informal. You can interrupt, you can throw things. Bathrooms are outside. We still have some drinks. If you want another sandwich, there's a few left on it. This is an informal thing on it. Don't necessarily talk to your neighbor about the golf score, but you can certainly interrupt with questions or thoughts or ideas. These are all intended to be fun. All right, so we're going to ask some questions now and start to build into the presentation of what is the investor's perspective in everything that we're doing. All right, so first question. When someone enters your community office, how are they greeted? And you have to look at these three and figure out how are they greeted. So do they walk in and nobody's there? they can't find anybody, or the person's asleep. I love the quote there, Brett, nice one. Or is it this cheerful group of people that run to the counter to meet them? So be honest now, all of you are leaders in your community. So which one most reflects your community when an investor walks into your community? 1, 2, or 3, click on your little buttons, and then we're going to show you where everybody is. Just answer honestly, because this is about, remember, this program, she's already making excuses now. Don't do that. I know, so answer honestly. This is about understanding and from a challenge standpoint, even if you have to honestly answer, it's number one. So has everybody answered? Have we tracking them in?
We got 46.
46? There's a few more out there. Everybody's scared. Tony won't even answer. He doesn't even want to answer. I'll give you an example. Here, pull up the results, Brett. Let's see where we're at. All right. So, and remember, this program is about self-reflection. It's about us sharing ideas. What's working somewhere else that'll work for us? Maybe we could find a community that also has a staffing shortage, and so there's reasons for this kind of stuff. All right. So two of you said they're asleep. I love it. That's great. All right. So listen, somewhere in between, right? And there's lots of reasons that it might be this empty, and it might be in this regard. Remember, the first impression. What's the first impression? Now, I'll give you some benefit. You go to Commerce Township right now. Commerce is severely understaffed. Right now, they just are. And it's no fault of their own. They're suffering through their budget. And so when you walk in, the lights are kind of off because they're saving some energy. And there's windows and things, and you walk in, and I almost feel like I'm intruding over in Commerce on it, and it's the same kind of thing. All right, question number 2. When you hear that someone wants to invest in your community, what most frequently comes to mind? Who do you think of as the investor? Is it the gentleman that wants to build a new deck and paint it on his house? Is it, well, this guy doesn't work for Kirko. Maybe you said Jones Lang LaSalle or something, one of the brokers. Is it, well, she looks like a small business owner. What most frequently comes to mind? Is it this gentleman here? When you say an investor's coming in today, what do you think of in your mind? If you're a planning commissioner and Tony calls you up and says, hey, we got a development lead coming in today, what comes to mind? Is it the guy that wants to build a garage? Is it the greedy developer? Who is it?
We're only at 32.
There's only 4 choices, guys. This is Oakland County. We have 48% of our population has a college degree or higher. I know you know how to work it quick. All right, now we're getting up there. All right, a little bit more. All right, let's see the results on this one. I know why you took a little while. Because everybody is the investor, right? Who wanted to answer all of the above? A couple of you did. Lori, a couple of you did. So let's relate some of this in real life stories, real quickly. I'm not going to use names, all right, except when it comes to my old community of Warren. In a different community, I got an email randomly about a year and a half ago from someone that I didn't think they wanted to copy me, they just did accidentally. It was about a 4-page story of someone that was trying to build a garage. And they thought they could build the garage themselves, so they went in and got a permit. And then everything went wrong from there. And the email was complaining about how they got misguided and misdirected and no help. And every time they went to the community, all they got was, sorry, your permit's already expired, or it's too long, or you didn't pull this, you were supposed to pull an electrical permit first. It was excuse after excuse after excuse. Now, this was from the perception of the investor, so they could be lying about it. I don't have any idea. The distinction is if it's all true, they weren't considering this person an equal as investor to the businessman that flies in. Some of you have heard me use the example of when we had the no cell phones at the counter store in Oregon. And we stopped the guy from Japan that was on his cell phone with his little case next to him, standing in our lobby with Julie Savard yelling at him, you need to take that outside. And it was a $20+ million investment that was walking down our front steps. This person is an investor. The greedy jerk that walks into your community, he's an investor too. He may be a jerk that you can deal with in a different way, but he's an investor, no different than the gentleman that wants to paint the fence or build a new deck and paint the fence. He requires a permit, just like eventually this guy will require a permit. And of course, this young lady, she's an investor too. Let's go to the next question, Brad. Why do you think they choose a particular community? So in answering these questions, do you think that they look at quality of life? You think, man, if they choose put this in a different way. Why do you think they choose your community? Well, we got great quality of life. Of course they're going to want to be here. You know, we've got this quaint little downtown area. Everybody loves it. They do great facade improvements, so we can get them grants on it. Do they choose your community because we've got the most colorful zoning map of anybody around? It's gorgeous. And I'm sure they can find a color that matches their shoes today or whatever. Or do they pick your community for number 4? And after you vote, I'll explain what number 4 is. Why do they pick your community? Because it's cute, because you've got the best zoning map around, because you can offer these great amenities. Why do they pick your community? Now this one, if you've been paying attention to me, not even tonight, but always, you should be really getting on it. But why they pick the community. Why does an investor, not why you pick your community, not why does an investor pick your community? All right, let's see the answers. All right, good. Well, this is interesting. So an investor that wants to come write a big check in your community and pay taxes, they're moving there because you got kick-ass trails. That's pretty good. I like number 4. What you're going to hear tonight encapsulates a lot of this. The diagram that we showed at the beginning that said, the site box was huge and the real estate box was huge and the demographic customer analytics was huge and they put profit off to the side and all that. Was anywhere on that box that said we have cool trails or our quality of life is great? Nowhere in that box was. What was in the box? Customer analytics, site, traffic counts. If you can fill parking lots, then people want to come write checks in your community. If you can't fill parking lots, but you can fill trails, they'll still come. It's just a different type of investor. All right? So a large part of it is what are you trying to attract? And that's why this is somewhat of a trick question. But for tonight is to get you thinking about what's the investor thinking of. If the person standing at your counter and wants to build a Walgreens, it's a different type of why have they chosen your community. You need to be prepared for that. What's our program called? One Stop Ready. You need to be ready for that. If it's someone that wants to build a house on it, a spec house, they may be here because you've got the great trail connectivity. You need to be ready for that. You need to be ready for all of those things. Let's go to the next question. All right. These are good. I hope you can see the pictures. All right. As an elected or appointed official, how do you think you are perceived by investors? So when you're sitting at the desk or behind the counter and the investor walks up and starts talking, and you're sitting there, how do you think they're thinking of you? Is it the stern-faced, silent, we don't care what you're saying, mister? They might not be thinking that. Is it the collaborative on it? Man, look at those people. They're working. The packets were open before the meeting even. This was great on it. They're sharing ideas. Or is it you think the investor looks up and says, they only think of us as the judge, jury, and executioner all in one. So which one is it? Which one do you think they preserve your community? The investor standing at the desk. Pretend Brett's the investor. He's a rich guy. He works for county government. Brett's the investor. You're on the other side of the desk. What is Brett thinking of you? Is he thinking of stern, fun, and collaborative, or I better not say the wrong thing? Where are we at? All right, let's see the results. Man, we're up to 50. People are voting now. They must like the judge picture. 2, fun and collaborative, 70%. So that's how you think you're perceived. Let's go to the next slide. All right? How do you want to be perceived? How do you want to be perceived? So vote quickly on this because you know the descriptions. Now, I hope we get 100% up here, but maybe there's one of you that sarcastically will say, I want to be the judge. There's got to be one of you that thinks you're supposed to be here. All right, let's see the results, Brett. All right, well, shoot, there is one. You smart asses. All right, the purpose of this is to get you out of the mindset. Now, most of the people that are here are already out of the mindset. All right, so who, by show of hands from community, who has everybody here that serves on every appointed or elected board in your community? Raise your hands. Of course not, right? So you're here because most of you are going to turn into, as we said last time, what did I say you were going to have to be? The leaders in your community, to bring back these mentalities to your community so that when the investor's standing up there, and I'll give you an example. I love picking on Orion because they don't do it anymore, but they used to. They had an investor standing up there, and wanted to go forward with something, and the person on the zoning board of appeals said, you know what, you're just one of these greedy sons of bitches that comes to our community and wants everything. Well, how do you think the investor perceives that guy? It's probably like this one here, right? So the idea is what is the perception of your community, because that drives everything. You can be this guy as long as you're this collaboration. All right, let's go to the next one. Right? I think we're almost done. What mostly represents the experience of going through your zoning, permitting, and approval process. Now, be honest on this. What's your perception of what they think? What most closely represents the experience of getting through you from start to finish? Is it collaborative? We sit down, we work with everybody. Is it, here, you know what, here it is, and they sit and they go and they try to figure it out? Answer this honestly. Are you the Chicago Cubs? You have great hopes, but there's always next year. We'll get to it next year on it. Or that project will get approved next year. Are you the Chicago Cubs? Are you the LeBron James? That you're great and you win championships, but you piss off 50% of the world. Now, honestly, are you the open collaborative? We're going to sit down with everybody. Do you let them go on their own, and behind the scenes you say, well, we're just waiting for them to submit their stuff? And this is the most typical prototype. Now, it's not saying this room, but think about it. This is the prototype. Oh, I heard it today from a city on the west side of town, nobody from in here, that said they haven't submitted. I said, would you call them? They said, why would we call them? They got the forms, and that was the answer. All right, so answer real quick. Everybody answered? 50. All right, let's see the answer. 52? No. All right, we're good. All right, one, everybody's happy, but only 50% of it. So 50% of the room doesn't think necessarily that you're the greatest, most open, friendly community. Of course, we want to strive for that. Elements of all of this are important. All right? You can be the Chicago Cubs if there's a reason to be the Chicago Cubs. But the perception of the developer needs to be that they, too, say there's always next year. All right? As long as the developer and the investor, the person that wants to build the garage, if you have reasonable cause to put them in any scenario, I mean, this, you know why I put this one? I'm looking right at Steve Cohen. You know why I put this one up? Because even the great ones can get a bad reputation. All right? So all of this is like a personification of what we're talking about. What do they go through when they get into your arena? Last question. Two more? All right. What most closely represents a scene from one of your community site plan review meetings? All right? So when you guys hold planning commission review meetings, do you have the no-nukes crowd that petitions out front? Do you get in massive fights and there's bloodiness? Does nobody show up to your or yeah, people come and they have concerns. We've got concerned residents, but it's always orderly and we get through it. All right, so which one is it? We turn everything into a protest. We hate each other so much that we fight. We do everything and nobody cares. Or, yeah, they come out but we get through it somehow. Couple more. All right, let's see what this one says, Bill. A couple more coming in. All right, so number 3, nobody shows up. So, Lori, is that you?
Yeah, I'm sorry, but when I voted, I took that as we inform our citizens so well. Perfect. All right, so in all of these scenarios,
does this ever happen, any scenario? Because I'll tell you, as you know, I've done zoning and land use for a lot of years as an attorney as well. I've been at all of these scenarios 100 times each and more. All right, so is Alan. He has. He's been at all of those scenarios. We've been at the pickets, don't build that in my backyard. We've been at where residents physically start. We've been at all this. Who's the most important person in all of this? Jack, who's the most important person that's there? Even in the empty room, who's the most important person? The public's the most important person? All right, you get a black mark for tonight. Lloyd, who's the most important person?
The participant.
The investor. All right? Because you don't have any of this without what? Somebody decided to write a check in your community. So you don't care if you have an empty room. If the investor's not standing behind the dais, you got a problem. And if the investor's not standing behind the dais, or not the dais, but the podium, and giving you a presentation, Jack, you get bonus points, don't worry.
Can I turn it into a gray one?
Yes, sure.
More people enough.
There you go. There you go. Perfect. All right, last question. Have you ever personally applied for some type of required permit? This is an easy one. Have you personally ever had to go get a permit yourself? Yes or no? It's a good one. I should do. What's a permit? Have you ever had to go through this stuff? All right, we got everybody in. Let's see what the answers. How many people have done it? 58%. 40%. Couple of non-answers. That's fine. All right, so
This is it. Now,
Well,
Matt added all these extra ones.
these are good. Oh, I love this one. This is the coup de grace question. And then Alan's going to take over, all right? All right, so when investment proposals come before you, do you feel you have the information or tools at hand to make a fully informed decision? When an investment decision comes to your board, whether you're a board member, a council member, a planning commissioner, a ZBA, or whatever you are, do you have everything in front of you, the tools, not just the information in the packet? Do you feel like you're fully equipped to handle it? Yes, I feel I'm completely informed. I'm somewhat confident. That's good. Oh man, I'm winging it. I have no idea what I'm doing. All of you have felt those, all four of those at some point in representing yourself on a board. Yep, every time I know exactly what I'm doing, I got all my information, I go out, I study the site, I know where are we at? We're coming close here? All right, let's see. All right. 16%. It's only 3 votes, but there's 3 of you in here that feel like you're winging it most of the time. And these are honest answers. I can tell that these are honest answers. I feel fully informed. I feel somewhat informed. I'll give you one example, and then we're going to go into the investor perspective. So on Monday night, I went to Orion Township. There's a Taco Bell on 75 in Baldwin. It's the one I use as an example all the time. I can use a new example now for this question tonight. So Sonic Restaurant is going in next to the Taco Bell. Again, it's at Baldwin and 75. Everybody knows where that is? Everybody knows where Baldwin and 75 is? You know that there's Great Lake Crossing Mall on the south side on it, and there's about 48,000 trip generations that go through the intersection of Brown Road and Baldwin every day. That's where we're talking about. Does it sound like it's a good place to go between that intersection of 48,000 and a Taco Bell to put a Sonic? Who thinks it's a bad choice to do that? Good, I was going to kick you out of this meeting. All right, so Sonic wants to go in. Orion wants to help put them in. They've got one curmudgeon neighbor. It's the same curmudgeon neighbor that fought the Taco Bell. We all deal with curmudgeon neighbors, right? We do. Yep. We have to deal with their perspective. Of course, Orion is a community of 35,000 people, so sometimes they get the tail wagging the dog by 1 or 2, and not the 35,000. So I went on Monday night just on a maybe. I might need to be there. They didn't want to necessarily delay anything. They really didn't, the ZBA. They wanted to consider the variances, but the curmudgeon resident had filed an appeal to the Planning Commission decision to the ZBA. Who has ever had that happen to them? Where a resident has filed an appeal of a Planning Commission decision to the Zoning Board of Appeals. It happened to me. Joe knows about it. So the rest of you, you would have been in the winging it category at that point, right? You would have been, because that's a scenario that, how would you know that could come up? But the difference is that did know that it came up. The zoning board came with the information that the appeal had been filed. I found out afterwards they'd known about it for 2 weeks. But they didn't do anything to say, how on God's earth do we handle this situation? So they got up. The resident came and spoke. She had rallied a couple of other neighbors that weren't really living close by. They did what they should do as residents. They spoke about the project. But the zoning board said, I think we need to table this matter because we don't know how to handle the appeal. And they were going to table it for 60 days. Now, what I knew that they should have known was that the option on the property runs August 4th. They can't table it for 60 days without addressing with the investor, he's going to lose his option on the property. So, I stood up, not that I'm some great kumbaya guy, but I stood up and interjected and said, there's a couple of procedural things that you need to know on how you can handle this. I walked him through the procedure on how to handle it. I said, have you asked the question of the investor of when his option runs on this property? Because some of you on the board recall, this is exactly how we lost the Taco Bell that's now there, and nobody cares about, except for this one very kind lady who's concerned. I had to be polite to her, I guess. They were going to blow it, and they caught themselves, but they caught themselves not because they were ready. They caught themselves because they were lucky that someone sitting in the audience had been through that 50 times before in his legal career and figured out that he better stand his ass up at the podium and explain to him how they can do it. So what they did was they made a motion to carry over the public record, let all the people talk. They preserved the public record into their meeting of August 12th. They asked the investor, does he think he could extend the option? The investor said, I'm willing to extend it for 30 more days, but at that, I'm going to lose my ability to develop this site. So they bought him 30 more days of time, which only gets him to the beginning of September. They moved everything to the 12th. They've already certified notice on the appeal on the 12th. They're going to decide everything on August 12th. Now, the whole project might lose, but at least they're in the game. And what they didn't do is they didn't come ready to the meeting. Now, I'm not saying you have to do lots of homework, but when little quirky things like that come up, you need to do your homework. Now, one of the things you have to do is you have to start thinking, what about that investor that's got to write that check to extend the option? What is his thoughts on all this? And that's what tonight's all about. We've invited Alan Kiriluk to come in and talk to you tonight a little bit about his experience, what his company does. This is intended to be interactive. He's going to give a presentation. You can interrupt him. You can really throw things at him. And then we're going to have some questions where we're going to interact like we did at the last meeting. All right? So without further ado, Al Kiriluk.
Good evening, folks. This slide has, I'm not going to tell you a story about this. And at the end of this my presentation, I do have a list of takeaways that I think are extremely important that you should be thinking about. But before we do that, who here would be elected officials? How many do we have? And how many are appointed to various committees? Okay, thank you. Well, you know, this slide says a lot, but there's something that's really missing here, okay? You go through the drill, whether it's a broker, whether it's an employer, whether it's a homeowner, not necessarily homeowner, but more commercial sites, of course, retailers. But, you know, it talks about all this data. This is all data. This is all part of Site Matrix. And they're all relevant. But you know what's missing? Is that before a decision is made, somebody, well, let's call Matt the CEO of Company X, right? And it's nowadays, you know, we're dealing with predominantly international companies with international boards, as we all know. So this data is going to get consolidated, presented, a decision is going to be made by Matt. And then, so Matt's got to go, and he has to go up to, say, he's got to go to his board and overseas or wherever the hell it might be, and he's got to walk before that board and say, yep, you know, I've made a decision. I have a recommendation here for you today, and you're going to invest millions of dollars, tens of millions, hundreds of millions. It's a 10, 20, 30, 40, 50-year commitment. And I recommend it. This is the best place for our company, our stockholders, our employers, et cetera. So you got to keep in mind, this person's got their career at stake. And they have all these influences. So it's not as simplistic as what you see. This is data that you do influence. You are the influencers of this data. But at the end of the day, Matt's got to step up in front of somebody and make a decision. Am I going to say, this is where we should go and have all those risks? And somebody's going to say, you know, it's bad, you know, let's face it, it's tough enough when you say, well, I've decided we're going to invest in Michigan. So right away, he's got people down his nose, looking down their nose at him. But aside from that, just don't forget, that's the thing. You folks are the influencers. You are the ones that can lead your community. You lead your other elected officials. You lead your staffs. And you, as what we're going to be talking about, is develop impressions. So don't forget the fact that somebody's got to carry this data on and go at risk. Am I not close enough? Okay. So, sorry. Yeah, all set. Okay, I'm going to try this. If it doesn't work, let me know, okay? All right, well, thanks for inviting me to be here. I want to just give you a little bit of background. I started out in 1962 as a landscaping and asphalt paving contractor, and then became asphalt, earth moving, road building, and so forth. And so I grew up in Southfield. My dad started a business after World War II in Southfield. And I was with his business. I was 19. He passed away suddenly, and I went on from there. Well, and I was honored. Our company was honored as one of the oldest companies in the city of Southfield for their bicentennial. So I want you to know what everything that I do address here tonight are my comments. They're my experiences, experiences of our organization. And I love Michigan. I love Southeast Michigan. I grew up here, obviously, so I don't mean to insult or demean anybody or criticize anybody. We're all here pulling together. You know, when you hear some of my, pardon me?
They're used to me doing that.
Okay. So, as it evolved, Kirko evolved. It was from a contractor, then an investor in the 70s, and a developer of residential properties, apartments, and so on. Late 70s, started building commercial and industrial, and then moved on to, and since then, I've been doing office buildings, retail. In fact, right across the street from the site, Baldwin Commons is one of our developments. We have evolved into a company because of my construction background. We have Kirko Mannix, which does construction for Kirko, but it also does third-party contracting and Kirko development. And we've developed approaching 30 million square feet here and around the country. So primarily, you know, we've been in the Southeast. We have some major stuff in Florida, we've been in Colorado, California, and so on. I'm going to just give you a little cross-section of some different types of properties that we have elsewhere. So here's a building in a 2.5 million square foot park in South Carolina, on the north side of Columbia, South Carolina. This is here in our community. This is Siemens Automotive Worldwide. We did this as a build-to-suit. Most of our transactions seem to be where we are the developer, and many times we're the owner, operator. So we handle the whole process, and we deal with that CEO that has to put their neck on the line, that decision maker there. So this is at 75 and M59. And we did the site search, we did the whole thing, we did the budgets, we gave it to the CEO. He took the whole package from cost to timelines to design, and he took it to Germany for corporate approval. It worked out fine. We did the Mimic on Updike Road here. This is part of a 4 million square foot park in Columbus. Technically it's Obitz, but it's Columbus, Ohio. This is a 1,300,000 foot distribution building. We did this on a build-to-suit long-term lease. Our construction group, we have an office in Charlotte, and we've been doing this. We've been doing churches. We do churches in this community, by the way. Surprisingly, we have quite a few churches in our background that we built for people. But this is a church in Columbus. Kellogg College in Kalamazoo College, excuse me. We did a completely new athletic complex, and we did design, development. We handled the architects, the engineers are all part of our deliverable, and we delivered the project and built it for them. And it's all field houses, soccer fields, baseball diamonds, all new football fields and so on. This is Charlotte, North Carolina. This is part of a Weyerhaeuser. This was a 1.5 million square foot build-to-suit, a combination of various buildings, corporate headquarters, research, and so on. This is a 400,000 foot shopping center in Shelby Township. This is Westbourne in Berkeley. Here's a dealership that we did as a contractor in South Carolina. Here's a dealership in Taylor. And here's we're particularly proud of flagship of Columbia Center in Troy and Big Beaver. We started this project in the late 80s, about 86. Probably some of you know our partners, Graham and Joe Orley, have been around forever doing residential development, and our families are still there. That's where my office is. Here's Arvin Meritor in Detroit. Here's a 160,000 foot office building, first floor retail and 3 floors of parking in downtown Fort Wayne. And this is a medical building, Farmington Hills, which we do quite a lot of healthcare. Just for a bit of background, I've been involved in governance of healthcare since the late 80s and still involved on the board. And I chair the Henry Ford West Bloomfield Hospital, so I think it's kind of interesting. It helps me also from a understanding demographics and patient and customer satisfaction and so on. Here's a good story and an important story, because this is what all this is going to come down to. Is it, in our where we are with development, new development, capital investment, reinvestment, well, you know, I think that things are going to change, and I'm going to talk about it, but this building right here is a real building. It is, we bought the Visteon headquarters in Dearborn. It had been vacant 10 years or so. I mean, Stone, do you know the property? Yeah. And so Visteon went out, built $350 million headquarters in Van Buren Township. It went into bankruptcy. But at any rate, we bought this headquarters, 100% empty. It was built for corporate headquarters. We completely reinvented the building. Common areas, infrastructure, elevators, extensive detail, but we turned it into a medical complex. So really the story, the reason I put this in here is that I want you to think about one of the things that you're really challenged with going forward. I sincerely believe this issue is, and this is where you get into conflict with the ordinances, is that you have to be open-minded about alternative uses. You really, really do. And you can get there, but if you as leaders don't facilitate reinvestment, what do you end up with? You end up with disaster. And so you got to be kind of, playing along. So that's it. Now, I thought I would touch on this a little bit, and then, in fact, if you want, we can do it now, but after this, I really want to encourage you for open dialogue. At Kirko, what we have developed is what we call our COPS process. Every time we think we have somewhat of a gleam in our eye about having a project, we have this process. And it's a regulatory process within our organization and it's a Gantt chart. So we cut off just the left side of it here. But it puts out the whole timeline as you would expect in a Gantt chart. It gives assignments. You can see we have development team, we got construction team, we got property management, we got financial team, and all these are orchestrated to deal with the progression. And so what I just wanted to kind of give you is a way that Kirko kind of approaches things. So when we think we have something going, we call upon and we organize our COPS process. And we start with this is all pre-construction. So we start with our internal teams, we assign people, we have an overall timeline, we get into the site acquisition, which goes into the site, the sites that we may be determining to use, selecting. We go into the purchase agreements, we go through the due diligence of the whole site process, we address the lead aspect of the project, and you can see we have people that are assigned the responsibility. Now this would also have a name on it, reality. And then it gives a timeline. So then we get into the property attributes, and we talk about the environmental, the phase 1, phase 2, the soil borings, test pits, and all the stuff. You go out, you hire people. These people say construction's responsible or development's responsible, an individual for the environmental. They hire the environmental analysis. They bring back the phase 1 to the development, to the COP meeting, and the report's made, and then you decide whether you need a phase 2. And all this is controlled and orchestrated. Soil borings, wetlands, property entitlement, due diligence, the zoning, and this gets critical. The zoning, what is the prospect of the zoning? I mean, do we think we really got a fight on our hands? I mean, I'm going to tell you, don't kid yourself. This is an impediment. If we walk in and we assess that we just got hell on our hands, we walk away before we even start. And that's one of the things you're going to learn is that you find that it's like a silent disease. You're just not going to hear about it. Many times, most people are just not going to hear about it, and particularly an employer. So, the ordinances, the covenants, utilities, we go through this process. Then we start to, once we get a handle on the site, we think we know where we're going, then we engage in design, schematic design, site plan approval process, and then we go through construction budgeting. Once we start developing conceptual plans, we get into estimating, and then budgets, and then the accounting systems that are used by, depending whether it's accounting or direct construction, legal, financing. Then we have improved investment committee approvals, and you can see with financing, we got debt solicitation, we may have equity to arrange, we have to decide, do we invite other people to be partners with us, and loan documents. That debt solicitation, those people ask all these questions. They want to know, where are you with your zoning? What's the condition of the site? What kind of problems do you have with the city? Can you deliver this project if we give you the money? Can you deliver the project? So, obviously it just gives you a touch on some of the agreements. Development agreements, partnership, loan agreements, design contracts, construction and contracts. And I'll tell you, we're involved in a deal here in Michigan right now. Now, I will tell you, it is the biggest wetlands, biggest brownfield in the state right now. And we are in excess of 60 major agreements. Now, those who don't, you know what that means. That means that there are lawyers on the municipal side, there are the government side, there are the tenants' lawyers, there are our lawyers, our bank's lawyers, and over 60 agreements. We've been at it for almost 2 years with one senior person full-time plus staff. And, that's what you're up against. Now, I can tell you, it's a $100 billion plus company that's occupying the building, employment and so forth. But you know what? If they'd have known what they were getting into, I guarantee you they would never, ever have done this job. They would never commit to it. And so that's what starts to ripple through for you. And then, of course, the permitting process and that kind of gives you an essence of the process that we go through. Now, what I would like to do is give you some key influencers, people that are part of the process from an impression standpoint that you may not see, but your actions and your messages and your signals and the way how you act is going to get back. You certainly, as I pointed out earlier, you've got your investors, you've got the owners of the properties, that maybe, developers like us or whatever, if somebody's going to be taking the risk and telling everybody we can deliver, telling the tenant they can deliver, or just doing it for an employer and helping them with the process. And of course, you got your employers, your employees, these site search firms that you're talking about, brokers. The brokerage community can destroy you. And at the end of the day, and one of the things before I even make a comment on this, in my career, I spent many, many years. I was on the Central Business District Association board for downtown Detroit, and I was chairman of that for, I don't know, a decade. And so I have done several properties, including the Stroh Brewery site. So I've developed in the urban environments in the city of Detroit. So what I saw going on, and I'll tell you, and I think Matt really hit it. He says you have to think about beyond what you're saying, beyond what's in front of you. It's the message that's being sent to the team. And I believe what Matt said, and that is, I sincerely, and I've said this many times, the beginning of the food chain is the capital investment. And you got to think that way. When you are reacting, acting, treating, responding, giving guidance, if you're so inclined to give guidance, but you want capital investment. Capital investment begins the food chain. Revenue, jobs, enhancing the community, stabilizing the community. And another thing that you have to really get into is the reinvestment. And it all goes back to things that we're going to be talking about here, but you have to be a real team player and represent guidance. To be honest with you, I think that our ordinances are really in trouble, and I think the ordinances are, master plans as well as ordinances, but master plans are a disservice to you today. I mean, most of them that we run across are based on greenfields. They're decades old. They've got a hardline criteria. You gotta have a setback. You gotta have a curb cut. Oh, you got 43 parking spaces. Oh, well, gee whiz, we gotta have 45. You're out of here. Now, where have you heard that, right? Instead of saying, no, okay, well, let's find a solution. Let's be realistic. If you want to recover and get your communities going, you have to be there to solve these problems that your ordinances, and if you have people around saying, well, here's the book, I can't do what, there's the book. And we run into it still in Oakland County, trust me. And so I would say that if every time you got an opportunity, whether it's a homeowner, whether it's a small business, whether it's a big business, whatever, that if you just think about what you're saying and how you're acting, and are you a solution-based and guidance-based individual? So I have other comments that we'll get into a little bit later here. Now, but you want to do that, Brett, with the organized questions?
You want to do the questions?
Yeah, fine. And then at the end, I'll give you some takeaways. Yeah, we can do how we do that.
Remember last time after the Farmington guys talked 800 miles an hour, they slowed down. I said, what was the one thing that you caught out of what you said? So, Joe, what's one thing you caught out of what Alan just said? Put you on the spot, brother.
Capital investment.
Capital investment is the lead on it.
Solve problems.
Solve problems is one. Lori, what did you catch out of what he said?
The parking, in the ordinances, I love that.
Right. Right.
The whole,
Yeah.
you don't have 45 spots, you only have 43. But what'd you find? Common sense.
Respectful of all the work that goes into what they do, that they bring to the table to you.
Respectful of all the work.
Right.
Those are all good
Right.
things.
Right.
Gary, what'd you listen to, or were you sleeping? You look a little tired
When I
back there.
heard your voice, I woke up. The obsolete master planning and the out-of-date ordinances, that was,
So here's the one thing I heard. He frustratingly said, if we feel we're gonna have a battle, we don't come.
That's right.
All right? If we feel we're gonna have a battle, we don't come. When do they make that decision? After they're standing there? They don't make
Right
it.
away.
Sometimes they do it when they get there. Remember, we go back to the picture. What is Alan? Alan's been around a long time. Does he think of it's the Korean Parliament picture of you all fighting? Is it nobody home? I mean, so think about that. In the context of what we're talking about in One Stop Ready is when groups like Alan, when big companies like Stephen Tajin, when they came in, when the group that's tearing down the Showcase Cinema, if they think there's going to be a problem, they run.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of other communities that will welcome it. All right, so with that, we thought we'd go through some questions.
Yeah. If we get a chance later on, by the way, if you have some questions along the way, please, I encourage you to, raise your hand or whatever. But if we get a chance later on, we should talk more about, and I do have more points in here, but we should talk about about engineering standards, permit formats, the process, the ordinances. I have several points about a lot of opinions about that. So, all right, and by the way, this is all about not criticizing anybody. I'm a gray-haired boy in our organization, of course, but I have to tell you, see, we have a problem in the state, I believe, this is what I observe versus what I see elsewhere, is that we're home rule. Everybody's got their own little controls component in their own agenda, and that is a curse. And so I really believe that you folks as the influencers have to mitigate that. And the way you can mitigate those influences is by what you do with your ordinances and so on. There's a lot of room to improve. Yes, sir?
Are you suggesting we just adopt the Michigan's code straight out?
Well,
Sounds like it.
well, I will tell you that it's a pity that municipalities run on with public hearings. They run on with the delays and tabling. You do your homework and address the issues, I believe that fundamentally, I'd like to know, why do you think every community of the 61 communities here in Oakland County have to have their own regs? I'd like to know why. Tell me, why do we need a set of engineering standards on one side of the right-of-way line, the center line, versus another?
I don't know, when Wixom, we just adopted the Michigan municipal code, so said, let's just come to Wixom, we gotta do something.
I'm sorry? Okay, good. Well, for sure,
We got 232 acres with a Ford factory, so it's.
yeah. That's right.
You missed that exit.
That's right. Well, we've been looking at that I will tell you, all right, I'm going to get specific, but I've looked at that.
So the point Alan makes on this particular issue is, and we'll get into some of these questions, is when you looked at the chart, right? I mean, do you really know that? I mean, did you look at the days that go into that stuff?
Yeah.
And none of those days were standing in front of your planning commission.
That's right.
So when they've got a site that's in Novi, and there's one set of standards, and they get chased out of there,
Right.
they got to go through that process again because the community next door has the Michigan code.
Right.
And so and maybe you do chase them out of your community, but in the thinking like an investor, what is the investor going through? Some CEO at a company, like you said, the other thing I picked up from the comment was that investor down in Dearborn had known what we were going to do, he never would have done it.
Exactly.
And this whole process of starting over and the immense amount of time that it takes
Right.
into. So our
Yeah.
first question is, what are some of the key factors you look for in a community when you're making an investment decision besides location and availability of developable properties? So we'll pose that
Okay,
to
all right. There's always the interest in dialogue. You want to know about the community leaders and the staff. Are they working together? Do you have undermining going on? Is there conflict? I mean, this is a serious problem. I mean, if you walk in front of that employer and you are in sync, that doesn't mean you have to lay down and let somebody roll over you. But if you're fair and reasonable and consistent, you're going to be a lot better off. But and I'll tell you, this you're not going to like. But if you feel that you want to be there, where your staff of planning and so forth, engineering, and then you also have your elected officials are aligned, but you have what I refer to as a person in the wrong chair. I've seen it. It's a dangerous situation. It's a tough thing. What I'm saying is, you have somebody's got the wrong attitude in the building department or engineering department. No matter what you elected officials say, you have to ask yourself, you are putting the community's interest at risk because you've got somebody that's undermining that process. And I've seen it. I've seen them, just their attitude.
So relate that back to the last session we had last month, right? We talked about that. You as a planning commission, how is the staff perceived in your office? Remember, you guys raise your hand. Remember, we had that conversation, right? Some of you remember, right? So that's important, right? The perception of the way that an investor thinks of your community. It's not just you. That's not just the way you conduct your meetings. It's that immediate entry point as to whether your staff is there to be the problem solver as well. Now, in Auburn Hills, what we talked about, what you do. Steve said it last meeting. Their staff is so empowered to be able to be solution makers. They know they've got the support from the top level. The top level expects them to make solutions. When they don't make solutions, they get upset.
What the council feels like.
Right.
So right at the first meeting, he said,
Right.
we got a problem here.
Right.
How do we solve it?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The other thing, of course, is reasonable demands and requirements. For the entitlement process. A community that demonstrates flexibility and support for a project. I mean, it's almost like being a good listener. Don't wear your attitude on your sleeve, because we developers and employees, we stand in front of you. We can read it. I mean, it doesn't take brains like a scientist to realize when people are aggravated and don't like what you're doing. But even if you don't like it, smile. So, and of course, you think about your reputation, because these reputations precede you. They're silent, like it's silent disease, and you got to be very careful about it. If you want to say no, you can say no. You just say it the right way. handle things appropriately. So, on another, what are some of the things the community does that kills a deal? Well, it's an unreasonable process, it's a prolonged process where people don't respect the timing, the capital commitment. And one thing I wanted to mention earlier is that don't forget that when somebody, particularly an employer or a developer comes in front of you and he's doing a build-to-suit because he's got an employer that's going in there, well, you know what? They have a timeline because they have a contract. They either have to move out of a building, they got to start making. We did the Magna E building here, and they had to get up and run it, and that's all they cared about. And you know what? You'll drive them out of town if you don't treat them, if they don't feel right, because they can't take that risk. So that
We didn't set this up, but again, one of the things I said last time, on our staff, we asked what first question, when do you need to open?
Yeah, what's your
Then
time?
you work backwards from when you need to open. A lot of your process concerns in your community where you have bumps, particularly from some staff. Now, if you don't have a curmudgeon staff member on your staff, you're lying. Everybody has one, all right? And they're not bad people, all right? They're good people. But if you're thinking about where are the gaps in our timeline, the way to fix that is to ask someone like Alan, Alan, when do you need to get completed in this?
Right.
He says October 1, and you get your calendar, and you say, well, if we're going to do that, here's everything that has to happen. It puts everybody accountable to the time system, and you're making his deadline, which makes the CEO call Germany and say,
Everything's okay. Yeah, right? I know, yeah. So the other things like, define what's really important to you. Be straight up, what's important to you, your people you represent, the issues with the site, and let them know, but be collaborative and guidance, give guidance. Of course, access, so make sure there's good communication. Independent acting staff, I've addressed that already. Try to express expediency and responsiveness to these people. Of course, if you don't have an updated ordinance that has ease for conformity, flexibility, and redevelopment, if you don't get at that, you get yourself a serious problem if you're looking for reinvestment. Again, we talked about attitude, about redevelopment. I do not believe that, and it's demographically, it's not a fault of Oakland County or Michigan, but it's around the country, is that you will not, fundamentally, you're not a greenfield community anymore. Your capital reinvestment is not in greenfields, essentially. It is really, and it's migrating worse. As you pointed out, office is declining. There's not the demand for office space per employee anymore. The world is really changing. People are getting older, the electronics are making things more efficient. So you need to have an ordinance that has a different view in mind, a different purpose for you. And I would say, now this is more for the elected officials here, that for your planners, you need to allow administrative process, good judgment. If you trust your push then give them some slack, and you just need to have, be assured, push that process, review your ordinance, don't let anybody clamp you down. Another one is don't re-review. This is a bad signal in communities, and it's still going on here in Oakland County, is that you're hiring outside consultants. The jury's out on whether that's a good program. Because we're seeing good experiences, we're seeing bad experiences. They don't have the authority to be reasonable and flexible. They're trying to make the case. And most importantly, and this is something that shame on the communities, but we see it everywhere. And that is that you hire, whether it's an engineering review, you hire these consultants to do reviews. But you know what you don't do? You don't control costs. And it just sends people ballistic. You send us a letter, and you say, hey, send me another $3,000, send me another $10,000. And oh, by the way, 2 years later, the engineer goes out and inspects the storm retention. Unannounced, send us $5,000. The project's been done for years. When you award these contracts and you have these consultants, you have to look out for your interests, but you have to be sure that they don't create annuities for themselves. And I mean, this is a serious issue.
It's true.
Yeah, you see it.
Yep.
Yeah. You know, the elected officials and staff, of course, you should work as one, you should act as one, you should try to get yourself collaboratively on the same page. And be careful about fees. You know, fees won't break a deal, but it's just don't be abusive. And I'll have some more
Now,
comments.
let me ask you a question on that. So, some of you have heard me talk about fees, how much I hate escrow accounts, because I call them maybe accounts. We maybe
Yeah.
need your money. We want you to write us a check so we can put it in some account because we maybe need it. But then, of course, the consultants always use it, don't they?
Yeah.
Always do.
Yeah.
But talking
Well,
about fees.
right.
If you have a collaborative environment where you're working with staff in a pre-application process, and you get a reasonable certainty of the timeline, and people are on the same
Right,
page, and you
right.
feel it's a community where top to bottom they seem they're on the same page, and you go through it, do you really care writing those checks?
No, if we're getting responsiveness and, you know, and dealing, you know, straight up.
So it's not about the fee or the size of the fee necessarily.
Not necessarily.
It's about,
Right.
you charge the fee, and then all of a
Right.
sudden, you're charging
Well,
another
let
fee
me-
without any responsiveness. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, let me tell you something that goes on. In other words, it's inherent, and I would say to you, when you walk out of here today and you go to the office tomorrow, you should stop this policy. And these consultants, and maybe your staff, they're making them work, and they're delaying the process, because you know what they do? They re-review. You know, when I started in the business, I could go to Farmington Hills, and I would submit a site plan or engineering documents, and then the engineer would, you know, say, I want this, that, and the other thing. We'd sit there and we'd mark it up in red. He'd say, okay, you're all set. Just deliver the drawings with this markup as shown. What happens now? You know, you submit the drawings, and they review and come back, you make the changes, they go in, and all of a sudden everybody rethinks them.
Right.
You're re-reviewing. Don't tell me that you don't, if you know what size, you only know how many storm sewers you need, or what size, or how many catch basins, and if you don't know the first time, then you shouldn't have the job to be redesigning it the second time. And it's these little, you know, idiosyncrasies that are.
So for the leaders of the room, you know, Gary, somebody else, in Orion Township, we ran our pre-app meetings where all of our consultants were required to come free to the applicant and free to us. And they balked at first, and I said to Don Wortman, I said, well, then we're going to get ready. Jimmy Stevens from OHM, I mean, they're good firms. They're good firms, they do good work. OHM represents you guys. They do good work. I said, if you can't do this for free, then I don't want you. I said, but we're not changing our fee structure for when you do your reviews. And Jim said, well, we're going to start losing money. I said, just go with it, Jim. In our pre-app meetings, we're going to mark up the plan like we used to do.
Right.
Like you guys do, Steve, right? We marked up the plans. They went away, they submitted plans according to the way they were marked up. They paid their fee for the review. And then Jimmy and Don, everybody in our consultants did the reviews based upon what we had agreed to in our pre-app meetings. Now, we didn't agree to site plan, because they would submit things that in those meetings, we would say, your drive is all screwed up. And they would say, this is how we have to do it. We said, well, take your chances, we're going to do our reviews. We didn't agree to anything. What we agreed to was we weren't going to write reviews that required resubmission so that Jimmy and Don could have the annuity mentality.
Right.
At the end of the year, I asked Jim Stevens from OHM, how'd you do this year? Jim said, we made more money than I ever would have guessed. I said, well, why is that? Because I didn't have to write 4 review letters. I did 1 review letter, and I collected my $1,500, and I was done with it, and I played golf. And this was his answer, no offense, he doesn't play golf. So
Mostly on your
for the
time,
leaders
not ours.
of the communities in the one-stop ready mentality, whether it's a staff person or whether it's a consultant, it's okay to go to them and say, I want you to participate in the pre-app process and get your comments down ahead of time. And then as a leader say, if you re-review and you're putting a new comment on something you should have caught the first time, I'll let it pass once or twice, but if you're doing it on purpose, then we have issues. You start to get this stuff under control within your community. And that is one of the most significant problems in land use over the last 10 years is this process of continual re-review. We need another check. So we got a project that you got your thunder.
Right.
We got a project in our community came into my office the other day because I got a note email that said, Matt, from an industrial building, Eugene D'Agostino. Matt, listen, Gene's been doing this 30-plus years. He says, I think we've done everything they want us to do, but they won't respond. I found out from this community, they won't respond because they say, well, he needs to re-up his escrow account. So they wouldn't even respond to him to say where he was. Won't put him on an agenda until he re-ups his escrow account. I about lost it. And so this is a significant problem.
Did they call him and tell him?
Well, we forced them to
yeah.
have a meeting with
Right.
them yesterday, and apparently it's on
Yeah.
track, but I bet Gene had to write a check. That's my guess. Anyway, sorry.
Another note, all right, how important is it to have an ombudsman in the community to be in contact? It is extremely important. It is, I can't tell you how impactful. I can remember that experience, and frankly, that's the first time I got the idea, is when I built in Riverside, California in the early 80s, probably 84, 85. First thing I did is I go in to present a good, quite significant project and meet with the community. There's this lady, she's in charge of you. She's your point person, she's gonna walk you through, advise you, bring you up. What the hell is this? I've never seen this before, right? So I learned this on other things and Matt knows, but I would advise you that if you have, so to speak, an account, assign it, like an account exec, call an ombudsman. If you don't have the budget, maybe you can get a volunteer engineer, or somebody out, there's a retired building department person. You can find ask for somebody, some of these communities are really challenged. So try to have somebody that's advising, communicating, calling the department because something's just not going, saying, hey, engineering, where are your comments? We're waiting for your comments. You're holding us up. We got a file to get in for a hearing, so forth. The bottom line is, I really think you'll get a lot of delightful reactions, and you're going to facilitate more deals that you're probably losing. Then another issue: how much does a welcome attitude affect your decision? I got to tell you, if you just get kicked around in the early phases and you just say this is just like not worth the battle, someone's going to be immediately looking at other sites. And remember, that CEO, when he, I had the same thing happen with Stevens. I remember when the guy looks at me, he says, now Al, I'm going to the board. I'm going to the big board. Are you sure you can deliver? Okay? And that's how you got to think, because they're going to want to know and have that comfort level that you're going to get up there. So, just keep it moving. The other thing, how much is it? That welcome attitude encourages the confidence. This person, when they go to that, so to speak, that big board, they have to be confident when they represent and advocate for your site or your building, whatever the case may be, that it can be achieved. They're next on line. Their careers are at risk. So let's see. What I would say is express a can-do, and we will solve. That doesn't mean you're saying yes to everything. I'm not advocating it. How you say no, but answer with a solution. We'll get it done. We'll figure it out. We'll figure out a way for you. And man, I'll tell you, somebody will walk out of there like they're on a high. Believe me. And so that again, is going to be a memorable experience for that applicant. They're going to realize, it's like a partnership. They're not, in there. You got an employee, you got a company that's leaving town, and they walked in with the city manager, and we're trying to keep him in the city. It was an international company, and the city manager, he was just that. Hey, look, we'll figure it out. There's some challenges with the ordinance. We're going to have to go work through it, but we're going to work on it. We're going to make this work. We'll figure it out. That saved the deal. That first meeting saved the deal without a doubt, in being in their community. Okay, how much does the master plan influence? Well, I've been touching on this, and the other problem with that I would just want to mention here is that the master plans, as I pointed out, are really behind the curve. They are, in my opinion, grossly inappropriate for the economies in the future. They dictate And they don't have a correlation to market. That's why you need flexibility and a little bit of judgment in this process. If you want to get that reinvestment message for specific, I'll give you an example, okay? In Troy, I chair the Troy Downtown Development Authority. I have since it's been created. But I've told the city, and they've got a great attitude, the planning department, Mark Miller, folks probably don't know. I kept saying, Bill, or Mark, I said, I spent a lot of time in Detroit. I can tell what happens when properties don't get reinvested. You've got a serious problem. I says, Maple, north side of Maple is almost no man's land. You got 14-foot clear industrial buildings. I said, what do you do with them? You got to open up your attitude. You got to open up your ordinance. You got to be, if somebody wants to come in with a quality mixed use, you should embrace it. Because those buildings are going nowhere in the real world. They changed their ordinance. They changed their master plan. There's a lot of flexibility for people to reinvest on that Maple corridor. You're going to see significant changes on the Troy side of Maple.
So who in here has you have a question?
I do.
Okay.
I really agree with your comment about the master plan and how it can really tie you up.
Right.
But practically speaking, at the same time, if you've got a planning staff, which is kind of where it starts, you've got to have some kind of guidelines. What would you suggest is, you just can't say generally, okay, we have a master plan, do your best job. But you might be,
You mean to your staff you're referring to, or are you talking about development?
That's where it begins, doesn't it? It starts,
Yeah. Well, I would start with, I would first off make sure you got consultants that have some background on reinventing the ordinances. There are people that I know in this community that have that attitude.
But you've also got a lot of people who have the credentials that say, yeah, we can do it, but.
Well, yeah, but, the danger is the person with the pen.
Yeah,
And if you're an elected official, you're in a tough spot to sit there and critique and wordsmith that land planner.
That's why I'm asking this question.
Yeah, so you have to make sure that maybe you need, you're getting me to one of my bottom line points, and that is benchmarking. I'd like to know, are you communities benchmarking amongst yourself for the best permitting and entitlement processes as a whole, as a community? Are you doing it?
It's kind of why we're here.
Yeah.
At least I hope that's why we're here.
So if you
Well,
maybe
then
if you
your bottom line also, from your initial comments, I kind of think you're suggesting maybe Oakland County just to have one overall master plan with input from the various 61 communities.
Well, there are communities around, Charlotte, North Carolina, I don't want to get into it, but Mecklenburg County, you think it's Charlotte. It's 90% of all the regulations by the county. But they're not a home rule state, so you have challenges, but you have to perhaps pick the right people. I just don't want to do that.
Part of what you can do, and I'm letting out because this is really to get perspective from somebody that writes checks, not from me. But your question of what do you do with a master plan that is a little obsolete, you've got to adhere to it in some way, because if not, you can't just ignore it all the time, right? You got to adhere to it in some way.
Right.
One of the strategies that you can start to think of is starting to benchmark and identify those areas of your master plan that are not functional, that are not correct, and start working within your planning commission to make recommendations to your council through your consultants. So why do I want to do this extra work? Well, because you care about your community. And if you start to benchmark and to build your own databases where your master plan is failing, where it's not right. Maybe you got extra time on your planning commission, Jenny, you say, we want to dedicate a half hour at the end of the meeting,
Right.
and we're going to look at this section.
Right.
We're going to look at section 26 of Pound. And you look at it and say, is this really what we intend and want to be doing? So if you start benchmarking those types of things, you can slowly get it. You don't need to go to the expense of rewriting your master plan. You don't have to do that. But you can start looking at it area by area. You get a project in front of you that you say, this is really cool. We have to make an exception. It doesn't really match the master plan. That should trigger in your head. Something wrong there, because we got something really cool that our old little colorful chart doesn't work right on it. and start to benchmark and say, we'd like to attack this type of area in the future, and you could start to go after it. And when the time's right, then you've got all the work done and the data done to be able to redo your master plan, update it into a more modern format.
If I can, right back here, Matt.
Folks,
Last question, have you ever made a decision not to go to a community based on the master plan?
Oh, yeah. And if we look at, there's a disconnection. There's, the problem is, and it's not an easy solution, I understand that, but people, whether it's me or the bank or an employer or a tenant in our building, they're market driven. The parking lot, the statistics, they do mean something. They want to know they're the employees and so forth. But, at the end of the day, they pinpoint a market, a location, it's access, it works for them, visibility. But if they look at the master plan, and that is based on, frankly, probably 40-year-old data, unfortunately, and it's a disconnect. What I'm getting at is your ordinances don't respect the market conditions, and the world has really changed in the last 5 years. Does that ordinance allow you flexibility? And this is one of the solutions that I'd suggest. Does it look at your ordinances to say, all right, we need more latitude. If we're a planning commission or a council or commissioners, I want to make sure our ordinance gives us a little bit of flexibility. So that if we see, hey, this guy, Matt's going to do a little store, and he's in a string of stores and it's been there for 5 years.
big store.
Yeah, big store. And he doesn't have the parking, you don't have a side yard. But you know what? But the elected officials say, this is good for our community, good for the neighborhood. So you got to be allowed by your regulations to use good judgment.
We had a question or comment
Yeah.
after that.
I just wanted to say, I think it's really important that the people that are on these boards, the planning commission and your zoning boards or whatever, my experience is, as a landscape architect, very few of them have the education
Right.
that sit on those boards to make a competent decision, and then to turn around and turn the master plan back into their hands is always not a very good idea, because you have people that are there for, they don't know the information that they need to know, and that holds things up incredibly. So I think it's important that communities own up, that they can't just put people on those boards. They have to sit down and have education available and required before they even get to see in front of any of the cases.
I'm also chair of the Oakland County Business Roundtable Transportation for 20 years. And that was one of our recommendations, what you're doing. And that is, you got training programs for these elected officials and these appointed people. That's really, I strongly support that. These people, they're coming on, they don't have the background. They need to be trained. And it's no disrespect, but you just want to make them as efficient and productive.
Because a lot of them don't realize exactly what goes into even bringing a plan to an office.
Right.
They don't understand it.
That underscores the whole title of this program. What's your role as an economic development? I mean, really underscores it.
Okay.
Just a quick one. In 1976, we did our first master plan in Auburn Hills. Rochester Hills at that time was Avon Township. They did a master plan and they had commercial and they subdivided the commercial. And we said, we ain't that smart. Our master plan shows predominantly residential and predominantly non-residential. And that gives you the flexibility. From time to time, planning commissions change the borders a little, but it hasn't changed over 1 or 2% since that time because of the flexibility. Master plans try to be too detailed.
That's right. Right. Too rigid. Right. Yes, sir.
Yeah, on your, what you call it, cops, your list, you're doing your site selection. You mentioned the financing and the equity. So how important are tax breaks and maybe some incentives from?
Well, you'll probably be surprised to hear what I say, but the employers are obsessed with this stuff. All right. I personally don't advocate. I would say no community should be given the incentives, and they're all on a level playing field. But we're fighting the world around. You're fighting around the world. You're fighting around the country, and it's a way of life. I think, you know, that you gotta do it. You know, if you can do it, you should do it, because it plays. Particularly if you're in redevelopment. If you're, I'm gonna tell you, it's a real burden to develop an old building. And I've owned a dime building, you know, 300,000 feet downtown Detroit. It was built in 1927. These old properties are real legitimate burdens, and they're basically forever handicapped because they always have these inherent, you know, aspects that are just not competitive. So, you know, if you got someone doing a nice job on reinventing properties for you, I would encourage you to reach out and do the best you can to get somebody to put their money in.
So, to supplement Al's answer, the tax abatements, the tax incentives, you know, the state doesn't do megas anymore, so it's really a localized question right now until they do away with personal property tax. If they ever will, and that might never go away now because it's been stalled. It's going to go to a vote of the people next year, so we'll see. But you have to think of it in this sense. The person that's making the decision to locate in your community is making a business case to their board of directors. If it's a larger investment,
Right.
if it's a mom and pop shop, they're making their own business case. But for the majority of the investments that we would talk about, someone's making a business case. The business case is helped by the tax incentives because they make a case back to wherever they have to all over the world to say, here's our cost of construction, here's our operational cost. That goes into that business case that they're making, and they're comparing your site against many. And if you think they're only looking at your site, then you're mistaken. They're comparing your site to multiple sites in multiple jurisdictions. So whether you do tax work or not is your decision on how your business case is going to flow out with them making a decision to come to your community.
It's very influential.
So
the cost of doing business, one place versus another. Yes, ma'am.
And Matt knows this also, but it's not just, you know, community against community. We're up against several different states in
Right.
comparing, and some of these states are giving away $26.4 million incentive packages, things like that. Actually, we met with somebody today that had gone to several states, and two of the states that he spoke of were giving away free land, willing to build the building for them and lease it back for $1.
Yes.
And for a 25-year tax abatement, and then they would have to stay there.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I know we're running a little late, so if you guys want to cut it off, let me know. I just have a couple more questions and I'll summarize, but let me give you an example, all right? In a state, a southeastern United States state, for us to do a development, do you know what they said? We were worried about water pressure. They said, we will be responsible to get you the right water pressure if there's a problem. Asked them about the sewer taps. They said, there will be no sewer tap charge. And then in many communities, they're given the land. And the other thing is, in that particular community, they said, listen to this, it's this industrial project. They said, look, when you file your construction drawings, we'll do site plan review while we review the construction drawings. So those are just some of the anecdotes of the things that are going on around the country that you're up against. So we move on to a few other things here. All right, what actions to take to make development process work more efficiently? Well, we talked about the ordinances, reduce public hearings, be very sensitive about keeping running on with public hearings. I mean, your reasonable demands through the process, get elected officials and planning departments and staff as one, expand administrative approvals, train for the right attitude for redevelopment within your organization and your elected officials and appointed officials, electronic applications, uniformity of ordinances, engineering apps, and so forth. I've pointed that out before. I just don't get it. I don't know why you cross the center line, you got a new world to deal with. Pre-submittal policy, it's very good, very, very good. I know you can't do it in everything, but when you got a meaningful project, bring your team together, have a good team leader, bring the applicant in, and be straight up. Tell them what your concerns are, your problems, whether it's a political problem, whether what's important to you with that particular property. But bring them together, but be straightforward and honest, and so they can walk out. And I'm going to tell you, you'll get essentially what you want. That's just like I'm an advocate for aesthetics and good quality architecture. You know, I tell people, ask for it. But if you're reasonable about process and how you're working with somebody, you're a developer. Most of them aren't they're gonna say, hey, man, they're treating me great, and I want to get favored by putting brick on the building instead of drive it. See what I mean? The majority of your property developers or applicants are going to respond. Just you can ask. I know you don't have the legal right, but you can ask and you'll get a lot of ground. Resolution property, have a resolution policy if you can't get things worked out, just hit a roadblock. Retain review fees. Developer is happy to pay the fee or an applicant, but you know what really grinds us? You say that, well, we don't have enough staff for processing. Oh, well, what the hell did you do with the money? You took the money and you put it in the general fund. Okay? See what I mean? Have people that, I talked to you about people in the right chair. And again, of course, if you want reinvestment, if you get reinvestment, you're going to get it's going to be win-win. Now, what are some things, and I'll just kind of walk through this real quick. What are some of the things we need to do better in Michigan based on our experiences? Agencies outside and municipality act as one. For the applicants, express and do support and championing, and give guidance. Coach and advise for mutual benefit, speed and simplify process, avoid conflict between the officials, more administrative rules, fewer public hearings, master plan definitions a little broader, gives the leadership, you can make decisions. And then, a big one is where's your benchmark process between amongst you communities? What are you doing to, that you learned, Stephen, that you're doing well in Auburn Hills? I know we're competing, but you're not competing, really. There are too many circumstances about a site. So if you want Oakland County to win, if you want your community to win, all in all, I would strongly recommend you do a benchmark. And I will say, look, and look at Detroit. Sorry, it's a very, very unfortunate situation, but you better act now. This stuff needs to be dealt with. So that's about it. And I would just like to give you a short list of some takeaways. Again, I'm being repetitive, but encourage reinvestment, critical. Simplify, collaborate among municipalities, uniform ordinances, more administrative. The ordinances, the staff, reduce costs if you can in your fees. Don't let consultants process control without permits, and no re-reviewing. And we're seeing dilemmas with consultants inspecting hired inspectors, where they are creating work for themselves. They have no flexibility. I don't know what, there's an authority issue, what the hell's going on. But these people are just being, take it or leave it, that's what I'm saying to you. And they're just driving, working on a major project at one of the world's biggest companies. Hardline inspectors.
So who's reduced their staff in this area of the world in the last 5 years? All of you have, right? So who has much less staff to work with than they did before? All of them, right? So, but the economy's starting to ramp back up. You saw the numbers at the beginning. More houses are getting built. The medical space is increasing. We're certainly very busy on our team. I know all of your communities are. We've got great projects happening in every community. Everything's moving forward. So you're doing more with less now, right? Yeah. So the perception of a guy like Al Kirillick walking in, he's not necessarily, I don't want to say not caring, but he really is not caring about that you're doing more with less, because he's also doing more with less. Who thinks that the investors of the world have had to downsize? I do. How could they not have downsized? There's no way that Kirko is the same staffing size that it was 5 years ago, just like you're not the same staffing size. Who thinks that they've got enough work that they can just wait for you to restaff so that you can meet every need of them? Of course they don't have enough work. So they're in your community right now doing projects, bringing projects forward. Not only them, but small, large, are in your community making investment into your community. The big hole, the 36% of our wealth that's gone, we're not anywhere near having that back. So it's slowly and incrementally growing. So if you get a contracted inspector, they're good because they're meeting your budget. We've got a lot of communities that are sharing inspectors right now. Rochester Hills, Shelby Township, sharing inspectors. As leaders in your community, when I say leaders, planning commissioners, staff people, electeds, all of you are the leaders in your community. You need to be attentive to this. It sets the image of your community. If Al's business or anybody else's business has an inspector that is basically, listen, buddy, I gotta go on the sheet of the paper because nobody else has given me any authority to do otherwise. That doesn't reflect badly on that person because Al knows he's just a hired guy from so-and-so company. Who does it reflect bad on? All of you. And so good, bad, or indifferent, you have to be attentive and attuned to those types of things. So who has an empty, obsolete building in their community? Right? Everybody does, right? I think we're good, aren't we? Who has done, who's on a planning commission? Raise your hand. All right, of the planning commissions, who has taken on, at any moment in their planning commission in the last 6 months, to pick one building and say, what could we do differently from a planning, master plan, zoning aspect to figure out a way to fill that building? Who's done that in the last 6 months? Wixom's done it, Oxford's done it a little bit. Who's made an actual change to their ordinance to do it? Getting smaller, future master, you're working on it, future master plan. All right, you guys are working on it. All right, who's heard of pop-up storefront? What's a pop-up store? In your mind? It's like a test store, right? Who does test stores right now? Who can name one company that does test stores? I'll go with the test store. That's a good one. Moose Jaw. Very good, Joe. That's a gold star today. Moose Jaw. So Alan and I were at the ICSC meeting at the Michigan chapter. You were there.
No, I actually didn't.
I missed it. So I was there, and I was talking to the Moose Jaw guy. Moose Jaw is located in Madison Heights. I like Moose Jaw. And I asked him, you're not moving your warehousing anywhere, are you? Because they're growing like crazy. And he says, no, we're in Madison Heights forever. This is great. But he was explaining to me what they do in pop-up storefronts. He said, we don't do any market for more than 6 months. We go in, we find a storefront. I say, what's your maximum size storefront? 1,800 square feet. He says, we want 1,800 square feet. We're going to put our product in there. We're going to put iPads, or now the Surface thing that they got from Microsoft in their hands. We're going to establish a market for 6 months. If we can't establish a market in 6 months, we're out. We're gone. Whose ordinance allows Moose Jaw to come in and operate for 6 months and disappear if they don't have a market? If you say yes, you're all on. All right? So you think you probably could, though. I want all of you to be thinking as a result of this stuff. Moose Jaw is an investor. Yeah, we could pull that off. We could pull that off. So wouldn't it be more productive, since you've got empty storefronts, to sit down and take on a project and say, all right, what's happening in trends right now in economic development? A trend in retail economic development. When's the last big box that got built in Oakland County? 07?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
07, 06?
Yeah. 07.
Don't fear, nobody's necessarily coming to build a big box.
We're going to have it on Telegraph.
We have a couple people looking, all right, but it's not rushing to. You know what's rushing to your communities right now? Mom and pop stores and pop-up storefronts from nationals that are doing warehousing and online sales. It used to be 80% store product and 20% online. And guess where it is today? It is completely the opposite. 80% online and 20% storefront. You go to China, they're building a zillion square feet shopping malls. Inside the middle of the shopping mall, they have internet kiosks. You go to the store, you try it on, you put it back on the shelf, you go out to the internet kiosk and you order it from somewhere else in the world where you're saving 10% on free shipping. That's the direction of retail and things in the world. That's right. Those are the directions. Does your ordinance have that stuff? Now, you don't have to run home and do it. But the idea of understanding where Al's coming from is his frustrations over why are you re-reviewing your damn plan? Why are you letting your planner do a 4th review and I got to write another escrow check? If you do that, then you're not watching your planner. Your planner's screwing your reputation. He just is, and he or she is. And it means good intention, but he or she is. On the flip side of it is, do you understand where your investment is coming from into your community? You, as one-stop ready communities, need to understand that. You need to understand both sides of it. You need to understand Alan's frustrations, which are real basic stuff usually, and understand where your investment is coming from. So we've kept you over a little bit. I think we ran little late? 8? Oh, we're good? We're good on time? Huh? So any other thoughts or questions before we wrap up? We're not going to see you again, I don't think, Brett, until September. Huh?
I have a question. We've gone over a lot of things, and probably Alan wouldn't have this problem getting money for his investment. What about the small businessman and the individuals trying to get rid of their home and son? The banks are very difficult right now.
Right.
And how, somebody has an idea coming in and putting in a small business, or expanding their small business, or building a subdivision where they need financing, try to get the money for the thing.
It's difficult, but
Very
the
difficult.
point of that is, for this program is this. If you're sitting on a planning commission and you're ready to approve something, or you're sitting on a ZBA for a variance, or you're sitting in front of the township board and you're ready to approve something, and you say, you know, darn it, this review's just not right. We need a little more time to make sure it's right. Based on that comment and that question, you should be thinking in your head, is this person standing in front of me out of money, that they've extended the option, they can't hold the cost anymore? We have a thing up in our Main Street program that says, what is the cost of an empty storefront? I always say, we need to recognize who absorbs the cost to the empty storefront. Somebody's paying the taxes, somebody's paying the holding costs, somebody's paying the rent. Every time you delay that process right now, it might be the scenario where the person doesn't have the capital to hang on for one more month, and you're waiting for your planner to do a re-review and make him write another estimate.
Can I respond? You know, I've learned, I saw a lot of tragic things in downtown Detroit, still seeing it. But I'll tell you what I would advise you to do if you redevelopment, to the extent you can. And it may be just cooperation, you take the person you're talking about. Is it, you know what? They have a property under control, or maybe they own it, and they want to do a new business. But you know, it doesn't conform. Well, why don't you give them a little bit of parameter, say, look, you know, if you do this, that, and the other thing, so that he can go to the banker and say, I can do what I want to do. Did you do that? Or does that mean the guy's got to get the money and then figure out if he can work with you? See what I mean? The other thing in redevelopment that I experienced that is critical is that it's the deliverable. Time and time again, deals died in Detroit, in urban, you know, old environments, because the property wasn't deliverable, because of entitlements, you know, various issues, you know, master plans and zoning. So if you have properties that you might say that have a more of a candidate, their prospect is to be redeveloped, think about what you can do to position the property for redevelopment. Make it more deliverable. The timeline for an investor to, you know, take the property and get it financially occupied and viable, you can enhance that. That's a magnet. That will encourage people. If they know, if you took, frankly, you know, we're working on something like this in Troy. We're taking some tough sites, we want to assemble, and want to make them deliverable to the investors. And we're saying, hey, if you come in with a reasonable plan that we think reasonably represents the master plan, you know, here's the property. We'll give it to you for $1 over what we're paying for it. See what I mean? You can get an option from the guy next door. So,
Actually, I do have a question. As a developer, and I hear you're working in Detroit and also in the suburbs. There's a perception that in some of the urban areas that there are political decisions that go into the requirements that certain communities place on developers. For example, if you want to bring a large business into the community, you have to reserve so many jobs for residents of that community. You may need to make a donation to some sort of
okay. You know, no, I mean, you know, they have Executive Order 22 in Detroit. Okay, so, you know what?
Is that a disincentive? That's where I'm going. Is that a disincentive? Or?
There's a lot of resentment, but that's okay. That's not gonna, that's way down the line. You get a site that's deliverable, you know, I know there's people here, let's say you take one of the old buildings in Putney. Well, where's your building department? How do you feel about it? What are you gonna make somebody do that property? You know, somebody's struggling to try to reinvent it. Why don't you team up with them and say, well, look, here's what we can do on the electrical, here's what we can do on fire suppression, and all of a sudden, you help, you know, you haven't sold the store, but you've given them a comfort level, and you should be trustworthy that you're gonna deliver, but say, hey, you you know, we can work with you to get this building cost effectively back into play. And all of a sudden, maybe now he can give a broker a listing, and it's usable, and it's in a reasonable timeline, you know. So you can position property, and you should be thinking about it, whether it's vacant land or existing property.
Joey?
I just had a quick, we recently changed the form-based only. Is that a good way to go? Is there a next level that we should be striving for?
Well, yeah, I mean, the whole world's changed. I mean, and I apologize for referring to some of these examples, but we spent a lot of money in 2 years in Troy with the DDA doing, and you might go look at it on the webpage for the city. We did a 100-year plan for Big Beaver. For example, I think this is really good for it. In the old days, right, in Troy, the northwest corner of Big Beaver and Crooks, there was that ratty old gas shell station, northwest corner. And everybody, well, the thing closed down, and short story, Starbucks went. So in the old days, Starbucks would have put the building in the back corner, and they'd have put all the parking on Crooks and on Big Beaver, right? That's the normal MO. I mean, I'm sure most of you are all thinking that way. So because of the new vision, the planning department says, no. We want it this way. You put the parking in the back, put the building up in the front, put some people spaces. Now, who the hell would think that on Big Beaver with all that traffic, that people would sit out there? I will tell you, because my office is half a mile away. It's busy every day. Every morning, every afternoon, every evening. People, I'm amazed. See what I mean? So you got to create the environment and encourage the design process so that you can bring people together, you create more, you know, just more lifestyle. And it's not hard to get out of people. I mean, out of a developer or pardon me? Yeah. Right.
All right, so we promised that we try to get everybody out on time. 8:30 is the time, so we're 5 minutes away. So we're just going to do a quick recap of this program for you all. One recap is while I see a couple of new faces, I see all of my good friends that came last time, and I see all of my good friends that I see a lot of things. You all are caring passion. You get a month off. August is freebie month. It's like summer vacation. We'll be back in September. In our program in September, we're going to start talking about management structure and tools in your toolbox. Pre-app meeting. The best practices for a pre-app meeting. What should you be putting online? Those types of things. The last session, which will come in October, is about those best practices. How do we start wrapping it up? From there, the program is going to get interactive with our staff and liaisons. Now, Brett and I talked about it today. That next go-around, is we're already signing up communities for the next go-around that want to be in this program, and they should be. Do you think they should want to be in the program? I think they should. I hope you're getting something out of this that's useful for you. The next time around, we may mix these things up, where we do a session and then we do a lot of interaction at your community. We don't know. So when we get to the best practice in the last session in October and start to do that, we're going to need your feedback. Because this is still us creating what the heck we should be doing in Oakland County. So you're helping us kind of set new charter ground here with doing this program. So takeaways for today are takeaways that will be for every day. It all comes down to how much you're willing to engage to adopt some of the things that you've heard today that will make a difference in your community. It could be a very simple thing. As long as you're moving forward in a direction that eliminates the waste that's causing the bad perception for you on a session like this, and the investors are going to like it. Remember the last slide, and we'll close on the slide where we put up the different types of investors. Pick the one that you think of. Who's the investor? Remember, they're all the investor. The old gentleman at the coffee shop that complains that he couldn't figure out how to build a garage on his house because the damn people of the township wouldn't tell me how to do it is just as damaging to your perception as an investment-ready community as the Tajins of the world that came to Auburn Hills. It's just as bad for your perception. Everybody that comes into your community is an investor. You must treat them as if they're investing $100 million or $100 in your community. And as you start to have that attitude in your community, then the curmudgeon at the coffee shop tells some guy he doesn't know there that says, Yeah, I love living here. This is cool. I built a garage, and they came out and helped me, and the inspectors were friendly, and went lickety-split, and all this. That could be the guy from Tokyo that's here talking to Al about the $30 million investment in your community. Everybody's an investor. So we want to thank you for your continued commitment. Have a good month off for summer vacation. We will see you all in September. Encourage your comrades in arms.
Thanks for your comments.
That's